Hello, friends. Welcome to the LeggLife podcast. My name is Adam.
My name is Sherry.
Sherry Beth, what episode is this?
Number 70.
That is pretty hard to believe.
Yeah.
We've made it 70 episodes, and if you listened last week, you know that we mentioned that we've kind of been running out of ideas, or at least hitting some hurdles with what to record for the podcasts.
Yeah.
And so we asked a number of you. And last week, we answered a question from our friend Auburn that had to do with kind of balance in relationships.
Yes.
And giving each other space to be like individuals.
Who we are.
Who we are, exactly. And this week we're answering another question from one of you. And I love this question so much. And it's actually a question that we've gotten quite a bit. It basically has to do with travel. And one specific part of travel.
Yeah.
Like, how in the world do we prioritize what trips we're doing next, where we're going? Like, how do we decide what's next when it comes to travel?
Yeah.
And I think we should start this question even just by saying there's no one answer to this.
There's no right or wrong way to decide how or when you're going to travel or where you're going to travel.
Yep.
And it varies for us.
Yeah, and I think that what works, we've found out what works for us. Mm-hmm. And I think each person, each couple needs to find out what works for them. So what we're going to do is we're going to start and just kind of tell you how we approach this, right? How do we approach what trip to go on next, where we're traveling next?
Yep.
And for us, it actually, we kind of have to step back a little bit and just kind of give you it's sort of our mission statement, maybe, on why travel.
Just our value.
Our value. There you go. That's a better word. We talked about this in a video. This was several years ago on YouTube about how we're able to travel so much.
Yep.
And Sherry Beth, we kind of outlined just kind of really the way that we live that allows us to do that.
Yes. So and I don't remember if we said this specifically, but we have talked to friends about this, that we intentionally live small in certain areas of our life so that we can live big in the area of travel.
Yeah. So what we talked about in that video is that for us, when we said, okay, what do we want? Like, what are the things that we value? Mm-hmm. Like, what are the areas of life we want to live big in? There were two of them. There was travel and generosity. Those were like the two. So if you want to live big in travel and generosity and whatever else area you might want to, that means, at least for most of us, because resources are limited, that you have to live smaller in other areas. So a lot of people look at how much we travel and think, man, like the legs must do really well. And we're, just so you know, super fortunate, super blessed, great jobs. Mm-hmm. But I think people assume that we do better than we actually do.
Right.
Because of how much we travel.
Right. And I mean, so we, like you said, we do pretty well, but we're not like rich by any stretch of the imagination. And I think that it comes down to the fact that we live in a townhouse that we bought 14 years ago. Yeah.
And it's a third of the price of the average home in Anchorage.
Right. And we both drive 2009 vehicles that are completely paid off. We have no car payments. And we do that intentionally, and we don't like debt.
No, not at all.
And so really the only debt that we have is our mortgage. And again, that's a small mortgage because we wanted to be able to travel and give when we can and not have our mortgage tie us down.
Yeah, and so the reason that I hate debt is that like every dollar I give to Chase, or every dollar I give to Bank of America, or every dollar I give to
Capital
One, or another car payment, or something else, is $1 less that I can't give to Alaska Airlines or Disney Cruise or Princess. You know what I mean? Like,
or somebody down the street who just needs help.
Totally, that's right. It's like it's $1 that I can't give to an area that I value more than that.
Right.
Now, here's what I want to say. This is not a right answer for everyone. This is the right answer for us.
Right.
And we have friends who the area that they want to live big in is all about family and home, right? Mm-hmm. And so they have beautiful homes, and that's where their money goes because that's their value. And I think that's awesome.
Right.
Because they know what area they want to live big in. So,
and that's their value.
And that's their value.
Right.
And so I think that even before we go, well, how do you plan your next trip? We kind of had to give that backstory to know that, this is one of the areas that we really, really value. Travel for us is something that we love doing together. Mm-hmm. It's something that is very rejuvenating and life-giving for us. Whether it's a 2-week trip or a 2-day trip, we just love going.
Yes, and I feel like we both, we travel well together.
Yeah, that helps.
And I think we both just have a curiosity for life, and that we want to, we never stop learning. We always want to learn more about the places we're going, and even if we've been there before, like what's something new that we can do in this place that we've been to before.
Yeah, and so the way that we approach this is we don't normally plan trips out really far. So we don't sit down and say, okay, let's plan out our travel for 2023 and 2024 and 2025. The reason we don't is a couple reasons. Number one, when you live in Alaska, travel can be very expensive.
It just is very expensive.
It just is very expensive.
Not just can be.
Yeah, it just is very expensive. And so if we were to sit down and say, okay, we know that, in February of 2023, we're going to Japan, right? Whatever it is. Then...
We're not. That's just an example.
No, it's just an example. But what that means is that I'm going to pay whatever the price is to go to Japan in 2023 because that's what I have scheduled. Mm-hmm. And that price will probably be higher than I want to pay.
Correct.
So what we do when we decide travel, because we don't really care necessarily where we go, we just love to travel.
Right. And so we have places specifically that we would love to go, but it does kind of come down to deals.
Yeah, and so that's what I was going to say. When the way that we'd primarily decide where we're going next is what crazy travel deals have popped up during times that we can travel.
Right.
And so we don't have, it's not like, okay, well, here's our itinerary for the next 2 years, because I have no clue what deals are going to pop up. And by traveling via deals rather than traveling via my calendar, it allows us to travel far more often because travel just became so much cheaper.
Yes. And I think a really good example of this, actually, I have, 3 really good examples of this.
Wow, okay.
When we went to Ireland,
uh-huh.
Originally, we were planning to go to Washington, D.C. because
Yeah,
I've
that's
never
right.
been there. And we both love museums. We love history. We love, I've never been to our nation's capital. And
Yeah.
I've always wanted to go. And so we were looking.
Like we were actively planning a DC trip.
Right.
Uh-huh.
And then there was these crazy flight deals that popped up to Ireland.
Yep.
And we were like, okay, let's go to Ireland instead because it's cheaper. And how cool. Like,
yeah.
Ireland wasn't on our radar.
No, not at all.
And now we would move there in a second. Uh-huh. But, like, it just, for us, like, that's just kind of how we travel. And so I think that was the first kind of major deal, I think, that we that altered our initial plans.
Yeah, and Paris was the same way. We had not planned on going to Paris. I mean, it's Paris. Who doesn't want to go?
Right.
Fiji was the exact same way.
Yes.
Was Fiji on our radar? No.
Not even a little bit.
Not at all. And then all of a sudden, I get an email that's like Alaska to Fiji for 40,000 miles. And I'm like, well, why in the world? Like, we've spent 40,000 miles to go to Orlando.
Right.
And I can go to Fiji for that same amount?
Right.
Why in the world would you not take that? That's ridiculous.
Right. And exactly. So on that note, though, when that trip was canceled in 2020, we were like, that's never going to come around. That was a once-in-a-lifetime deal. Fiji's now off the table. Like, that would have been really cool, but, like, we're not going to spend the money that it would take for us to go to Fiji.
Yeah, if we were just like, nope, I'm set on going to Fiji, we're going to book our tickets, it would have cost us so much money that Fiji would have been the one trip that we did probably for like 18 months or 2 years.
Right.
And so it's like we weren't willing to sacrifice all of the rest of the travel we want to do for one trip.
Right.
And so we had written off going back. Like, Fiji was like, well, we had our shot, COVID ruined it, sucks.
Right.
But then when it comes back up...
But then it came back up, and we're like, oh, geez. And so we booked it again.
Totally.
For that 40,000 miles. So But yeah, like that tends to be how we plan our travel.
We look for the best deals that pop up when we have availability. So let me talk a little bit about that part. And I'll use kind of where we're at currently as an example for this. So we have Fiji coming up next month, big trip, couple weeks. And then we have another like 10-day trip coming up in December to Florida for a Disney cruise. Those are two big trips within
a couple of months.
Yeah, like 3 months of each other. And so even though we're home in October and November, I know that we don't have the time off of work to add another big trip. So I know when I'm looking for flight deals, anything that comes up in October, November, it doesn't really matter what it is, we're not going.
Right. If Paris comes back up for $400,
no,
that would have been awesome, but we can't afford to take the time off.
Yeah, and so it's like we just know with our life rhythms and our work rhythms, how much time we have, when can we go, that October and November, because of trips we already have planned, off the radar.
And probably, honestly, January and February, because we do have
the viewer cruise in March. But here's what I'll say. I've already started looking next May, June, July, August, September, next fall of 2023. If there was a deal that came up right now to a place in the world that isn't even on our radar, you better believe that I would talk to Sherry and we might jump on it.
Right.
Because we know that those are like dates that we have open for potential travel.
Yep.
Now, to go along with that, because we love the travel so much, we're not saying, well, we have Fiji, we have Florida in December, so I guess that's going to be it. We still say, okay, how can we travel and just not take time off of work?
Right. So then that's when weekends come in.
Yeah. So we were in Denali last weekend. We're flying down to Juneau this next weekend.
Yep.
And so those are trips that are also super affordable. I mean, the reality is that Juneau isn't costing us anything. We used air miles to get there. We're staying with friends when we're there. We're not renting a car. And so, like, going to Juneau for a weekend, we still get to travel.
It'll probably save us money because we won't be in towns just spending random,
at Targets.
At Target.
There's no Target in Juneau, so Juneau will actually be cheaper than staying home. You're probably exactly right. But that's how we look at it. We're like, okay, so then how can we still travel in the parameters that we have, where we can't do a week-long or a 10-day trip?
Yeah.
But we still want to travel.
Yeah, so we take advantage of long weekends. Yes. And it's easier to take a day off of work than a week.
A Friday or a Monday.
Right. Yeah. And so if we can extend, if we can do a long weekend and just take one day off, that's easier.
Now, there are some places that are on our list that we really want to go. And the one that I think of right now is the UK. We have wanted to do a UK trip for years. And it's never happened. We've never seen a great deal to the UK during a time that we could travel.
Right.
And so that's been difficult. So honestly, for the UK trip, one of the things that we'll probably do is, obviously we've been saving a lot of air miles. We probably will say, okay, let's just book some air mileage tickets to the UK and just kind of make that trip happen.
Right. I think that's probably what we'll end up doing, just because we haven't seen any kind of deals come around.
And we know we want to go. So we will do that. Now, there are a few things that I want to address. First of all, some of you may be listening going, yeah, that's really easy to do, Legs. You guys don't have kids. You're exactly right.
Yes, correct.
And here's the thing. We admit that changes our situation very, very much. We have just a flexibility in life that, and we're able to be spontaneous in a way that we just know that a lot of people can't.
Right, that a lot of people our age can't, just because a lot of people do have families, and so you're tied more to school schedules and it just...
Yep, life rhythms and that kind of stuff.
Right.
Yeah, it's like you might only be able to travel during spring break, summer, or Christmas break, right? And so you might not be looking for travel deals, like you're looking for specific travel on specific dates. So, like, we know that is for sure a game changer with our situation. And so we get that. But again, we've figured out what works for us. We love to travel. And it doesn't matter for us. Like, obviously, big trips like Fiji, like Paris, are spectacular and they're amazing. But we can't do those all of the time.
Right.
And so we still value travel. And sometimes travel for us looks like a weekend in Denali.
Right. Leaving Friday after work and coming back Sunday.
Yep. There have been years where travel looked like camping. Not recently, because you hate camping. But there were years.
Oh.
But there were years like it looked like that, because that's what we realistically could do and could afford.
Right.
You know, it's like there were times in our life when it's like we couldn't afford big trips, but I could afford a campground for a weekend, right? And so we went and did that.
Yep. So
I think that you have to start by asking the question and say, okay, what is a realistic place for me to start, for our family to start when it comes to travel? And then kind of go from there, take a step in there. Maybe it's a small step. It's like a weekend getaway. Maybe it's a spontaneous flight deal that comes up. You know, I follow so many flight deal places on like Twitter and on like, I get all sorts of like text notifications that it's like $199 from Dallas Fort Worth to Peru. I'm like, well, that's 99% of the time. That's not a deal that matters to us.
Right.
But maybe someday we can use miles to get to Dallas and then fly to Peru.
Right.
Who knows?
Right. Yeah. So I think that it comes down to two things. What are the things in your life that you value the most? And it doesn't have to be travel. But if travel is one of the things that you value the most, how can you make that happen?
Yep.
What does that look like within your budget, within your time frames, within, you know, your rhythms of life? And then, yeah, like, I mean, it just... And I do think that it for us, it really did just start small. Like, we would go camping for the weekend, or we would go to Seattle for the weekend. And, you know, for us, that's a 3.5 hour flight.
Which is easy for Alaska.
Which is easy for Alaska. And so, like, that was just kind of an easy weekend trip for us. So, like, what are easy kind of trips that you can just even start to dip your toe in, and watch for those deals.
And then the harder part of this is that, you know, when we were first married, early newlyweds, you know, we did rack up credit card debt. We did get into debt. And for us, the reality is that, we value travel, but we weren't in a place where we could travel and like maintain our debt.
Right.
And so
pay all of our bills.
And so what we had to do is say, okay, we're going to buckle down. And it's like, for the next year, 18 months, 2 years, like, travel's off the table. And we're just going to like crack down and try to get all of this debt paid off, so that a year from now, or 2 years from now, or 5 years from now, you know, that number of dollars every month that is going to maintain and manage debt can now go to help you live big in the areas that you want to live big in.
Right.
That's the goal. That's the freedom in erasing debt, is that you can now put dollars to the things that really matter to you.
Right. And so even just like, you know, we've sort of tentatively discussed getting me a different vehicle that has, you know, 4-wheel drive or something, and because of Alaskan winters and whatever. But then we're both just like, but we don't want another car payment. Like, I'd almost just rather keep driving my little Nissan and keep getting studded tires on it, because it drives fine in the winter, and we don't have a car payment.
Well, and that's the thing, is that we just know that,
because then that's how many hundreds of dollars a month that we don't have that could be going toward a weekend getaway.
Yep. That's exactly right. So that's the balance in this. I mean, here's the reality. I wish, Sherry, I really do wish that we had the kind of life where it's like, you know what? We can live big and have a big, huge new home, and we can live big with new cars, and we can live big with lots of travel, and we can live, but like, that's just...
We don't have a both and.
No, we don't have a both and. So we have an either or.
Right.
And so that's the reality of the stage of life we're in.
Right.
If you can have a both and, God bless you, live that up. Like, go do that. Like, that's what I want you to do that. But for us, it's an either or.
Yep.
And so we've just chosen that. For us, it's living small in areas like home, in areas like cars, in areas like debt, honestly. And so that we can live bigger in in travel and generosity and those kind of things.
Yep.
So I do think that is the most important first part of that question that was asked, is how do you know what trip is next? It's like, well, for us, it's knowing that we value that next trip.
Right.
And then it's flight deals, and it's travel deals, and it's mileage deals, and it's, what combination of those things can get us the coolest possible trip.
Right.
That lets us, again, Fiji. If we had to just go on Fiji Airlines website and buy the plane tickets to fly to Fiji, we would never go to Fiji. We'd fly somewhere that's much cheaper, that's much closer.
Right.
We'd fly to the Caribbean. We'd fly to Mexico. We'd fly to Hawaii. I mean, my goodness, you can get to, it's a direct flight, Anchorage to Hawaii.
Right.
And multiple times a day on Alaska Airlines, we can get to Hawaii simple. And so it's like, if that was what it was, we'd just go book those tickets.
Right.
But this crazy deal came up, and it's like, why in the world wouldn't you take advantage of that?
Right. And then I think also, like, the way that we travel, we tend to travel on a budget. And so we don't stay at big, fancy, expensive hotels or places. Like, we would rather stay in a cheaper place and be able to put our money toward more experiences and more trips and more whatever. So,
well, this was actually you guys, this was sort of the issue we had with the Princess cruise we took recently, is that we realized, man, we sure loved cruising with Disney, but if you're telling me that I can take 3 cruises for the price of 1 Disney cruise,
right?
Wait a second, you're telling me I can travel 3 times as much
for the
same price
as 1. I know.
What?
Right.
All of a sudden, like, because our value is travel, our value is not Disney, our value is travel.
Right.
And so all of a sudden, that value of travel is kind of like, yeah, maybe we look at other cruise lines.
Yeah.
Because of that.
Yeah. And it was a great cruise. And so,
it was awesome.
like, and I think that is just, that's what we value more, instead of, this one ginormous, super expensive, amazing trip. We take many more small, cheaper trips.
Did you just curse?
Trips.
It sounded... For you guys haven't listen back, it sounded like an S word in there somewhere, Sherry.
Wasn't.
It sounded like it.
And so it's just, I don't know, that's just kind of more what we value. We'd rather have 3 or 4 trips that equal $10,000 than 1 trip that equals $10,000.
Without a doubt. If I have $10,000 that's in a travel budget, my question is not how can I have the best single vacation. My question is how in the world can I get as many vacations as possible out of that 10,000?
Right.
That's our question. Like, how do we get as many out of that?
How can we spread this out?
That's exactly right. How can I travel 10 times with that $10,000?
Right, as opposed to once.
That's exactly right. The other thing I want to say that's kind of goes hand in hand in this, and in some ways a little bit with the last podcast we talked about, where, there are places in this world and even things to do on vacation that would be more Sherry. And there are places to go and things to do in this world and on vacation that would be more me.
Yeah.
And I think that's another thing, is finding that balance in making sure that, man, Adam, the last 5 vacations we've gone on have all been kind of for you. It's like, hey, we keep going to Seahawks games. What's going on with that? Right? That then
when do I just get to sit on a beach and read?
That's exactly right. And so that's the balance in that as well, that as we're looking for deals that come up, if it is a deal that is not something that would be really enjoyable for both of us, or if it's a deal that is not something that just like feels right for us, we just wouldn't jump on it.
Right.
So, again, finding that balance. So, friends, I hope this answered the question. Any other thoughts, Sherry?
I don't think so.
No?
I feel like we mostly probably answered it. And, again, I think that it really is. It's different for everybody. It depends on what you value. It does depend on your disposable income.
I was going to say, I have a friend who, because of his work and what he does, basically gets 1 vacation a year. And so his 1 vacation, that's just the reality of the job that he's in and the position he's in, he gets 1 a year. And so their vacation is normally very over the top. But he knows that, like, I get one shot a year.
Right.
You know what I mean? And so it's like,
this has to tide me over for a whole other year.
Yeah, and so they are the kind that it's like $10,000 on one vacation because that's the one they get each year.
Right.
Right? And so you have to know, like, realistically, what can you do? Realistically, how often can you travel? Realistically, what is a budget you have? And then start from there.
Right. And if travel is something that you really value, are there areas in your life that you can live smaller?
Yep.
So that you can live big in the area of travel?
Yeah. Do you have to have cable?
Right.
Right. We had to
do you have to have a really big house? Do you have to have a brand new car? Do you have to have, what are things that you could cut back on in order to make room for travel?
Yep. That's exactly right. Yeah. So there you go, friends.
Yeah.
Hope this answered the question. Let us know. Go over to YouTube, search LeggLife Podcast, and we would love to hear from you guys. Because again, this is the kind of thing that every person, every couple is going to do this differently. I'd love to know if you do this differently than we do. How do you do it? How do you decide what trip is next? How do you approach planning for travel? Are you like us where it's like, I have no clue what trips we're taking next year? It's like we could go to Japan and visit like Tokyo Disney next year. Or we could go to Fresno and Reno on a road trip. Like I literally, it's like I literally have no idea.
We don't know.
We have no clue.
We have one thing on the books for 2023.
We have one thing on the books for 2023.
Yep.
And everything else that will fill in those gaps are things that will just kind of pop up. So I want to hear from you. How do you approach travel? So go over to YouTube, search LeggLife Podcast, hit that subscribe button, and then Sherry, what else should they ring?
The bell.
You're so good at that. And let us know in the comments how you approach travel. I really am interested to read your comments on this one.
Yeah.
Because I think it's fascinating finding out how people approach something like this.
Yes, I agree.
So, you guys, we love you, and we will see you next week with episode 71 of the LeggLife Podcast.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.